Hi friends, it's Andrew Goodall here again from Nature's Image Photography with a look at something new. Well, it's new for me anyway, on the Panasonic Lumix G9. Before we get started, be sure to click that subscribe button if you haven't already to keep up with all my work on the G9 and my entire world of photography. So this is my story about how I came to assign custom settings on the G9. But to properly explain how I did it, I first need to explain why I did it. So this is also going to be partly the story of my first foray into variable frame rate video. I can't do one without the other, so today you get both. I really never thought I would have a use for custom settings. For still photography, I shoot in manual mode and I always choose the aperture, shutter speed and ISO myself. I shoot RAW files so I don't need to mess around with things like white balance and photo style. So I never saw a need for creating custom settings, and to be honest, having never done it before, it sounded like it might be kind of complicated. So up until now I pretty much ignored the whole idea of custom settings. But things started to change when I began adding slow motion video to my portrait shoots. At first I was satisfied with the basic high-speed video function. As someone who really knows nothing about video, it was simple to use and that worked for me. Apart from choosing the video frame rate, there were literally no other options in the menu to choose from. So all I had to do was turn the mode dial to the video M position and start shooting. It was actually comments from YouTube viewers, and here are just a couple of them, that persuaded me that I could get better results if I started using the variable frame rate or VFR function that came in last year's firmware 2.0 update. So I gave it a try, and my initial efforts made it pretty clear that I had a lot to gain from VFR video. But unlike the basic high-speed video, now I had a whole lot of options to consider. In addition to the frame rate, I can also choose between shooting in P, AV, TV or manual, and then decide what exactly I want to do with my aperture, shutter speed and ISO. Now, this is not supposed to be an expert guide to VFR video. I'm still learning this stuff myself, so please don't just follow my example without doing some research of your own. But for what it's worth, this is how I've set my camera up for VFR. For recording quality, I'm shooting MOV files at Full HD and 60p, and I'm shooting in shutter priority with auto ISO. And for whatever frame rate I use, I'm selecting the slowest shutter speed available at that frame rate. And here's where I started getting into trouble. When doing a portrait shoot, I can no longer just turn a dial and start shooting. The model has to stand around waiting while I sort out my settings, and often the spontaneity of the moment is gone. To make matters worse, when I went back to manual to shoot more stills, I kept forgetting to change my ISO back to 200, and I was getting a whole lot of shots taken at unnecessarily high ISO. So I started thinking maybe assigning my VFR video settings to the custom settings modes might solve the problem. Well, it did, and it was easier than I thought. Here's how it works. First, I have to choose my VFR settings. I make sure the old high-speed video function is turned off. I'm already set to shutter priority, but now I have to choose my frame rate, and here I'm choosing 180 frames per second, which plays back at 33% speed. This is what I mostly use for very quick things like birds. Then I get out of the menu and return to shooting mode, where I make sure the shutter speed is on 200, which is the slowest shutter speed I can use at this frame rate, and change the ISO to auto. And now I'm all set to shoot at 180 FPS. So next I go back to the menu and go down to the fourth section with the little spanner. Then I select Custom Set. I want to assign these settings to C1 on the mode dial, so I choose C1, select Yes to overwrite, and I'm done. Those settings will now be preset when I turn the mode dial to the C1 position. When I'm shooting people, I find that 33% playback speed is a little too slow, so I more often shoot at 150 frames per second that plays back at a slightly faster 40% speed. So I also decided to assign that to C2. So first I go back to the Creative Video part of the menu, go to Variable Frame Rate and set it to 150. Then I return to the shooting screen. I don't need to touch ISO this time because I'm already in auto ISO from before, but I do want to change the shutter speed to 160, which is the slowest shutter speed I can use at this frame rate. Then back to the fourth part of the menu into Custom Set to assign the new selection to C2. Now whenever I want to use that video option, I only have to turn the mode dial to the C2 position. Now I have two different video functions assigned to the C1 and C2 positions. Let's see how easy it is for me now to switch from shooting stills in manual mode to shooting slow motion video using those custom settings. Here I am again in manual mode, ready to shoot stills, and as you can see I'm just sending my shutter speed, aperture and ISO all over the place to prove a point, because no matter what settings I'm in here, all I have to do is turn the mode dial to C1, and you can see I'm all ready to shoot at 180 frames per second, which plays back at 33%. I'm in auto ISO and the shutter speed's on 200. If I change to C2, I'm all ready to go at 150 frames per second, and the shutter speed is preset to 160. Now I press the button to start recording a short bit of video footage, remembering that the time it takes to record will be much shorter than the length of the video. As you can see, I had just enough power left on my battery to play it back. It's already converted to 40% speed, and the screen tells me that what took 10 seconds to shoot has produced a 27-second video file. And the final bonus is, after all that, when I go back to shooting stills in manual, my settings will be just where I left them. So that's how I'm using C1 and C2 custom settings modes. But of course these modes are not just for video, you can use them for just about anything. So here you can watch in real time as I choose a totally random bunch of settings and assign them to C3. But let's say I, for a particular kind of photograph, want to shoot in AV or aperture priority, and for this kind of photograph I know that I'm going to want to shoot at 400 ISO at f8, and I'm going to want to use, let's go into the function 2 setting, and I'm going to want to choose shady white balance. So I'm going to click all that, and if I now go into the menu, custom settings menu, and assign that to the C3 and click yes, now that's set. Now I can go back into shooting manual. I am going to set my white balance back to AWB where I normally have it. I can change my ISO to whatever I want. I can change my shutter speed and my aperture to whatever I want. But when I turn my dial at the top to C3, you'll find I'm in aperture priority, f8 and shady white balance. So exactly what I set up. I didn't have to go through all that process again. I just set it to C3 and it's already preset for me. And that's my story. It turns out that assigning custom settings is much easier than I thought it would be, and way more useful than I thought it could be. I know experienced photographers might be shaking their heads at why it took me so long to make this discovery, but for beginners I hope you found this video helpful. Now I just want to finish with a few recent samples of variable frame rate video. I'm Andrew Goodall, this is Nature's Image Photography. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.